Forget missiles. Is Trump completely blindsided by Mojtaba's darkest strategic move exploiting global vulnerabilities? Trump's aggressive war gambit against Iran now directly strikes dinner tables worldwide through skyrocketing commodity prices. Trump's dangerous Hormuz escalation unleashes massive global surge in essential food and fuel costs overnight. Iran deploys scariest revenge plan, weaponizing Hormuz blockade to deliberately starve millions worldwide through shortages. Iran steadfastly holds defensive line, while panicked rest of world pays crippling economic price for U.S. miscalculation. The United Nations has warned that rising energy costs and Middle East disruptions are pushing food prices higher worldwide, complicating efforts to stabilize global markets. The UN Food and Agriculture Organization (FAO) said prices rose for the third consecutive month in April, underscoring a gradual but steady inflationary trend. The FAO Food Price Index averaged 130.7 points in April, marking a 1.6% increase from March and reflecting broader pressure across several commodity groups. The index was also about 2% higher than the same period last year, signaling mounting strain on consumers in both importing and low-income countries. The index hit a peak of 160.2 points in March 2022 after the start of the Ukraine war, illustrating how major conflicts can quickly drive up global food commodity prices. The FAO's chief economist noted that rising energy costs have boosted demand for biofuels made from vegetable oils, directly feeding into food price pressures. The latest price spike comes amid the Iran-related war disruptions and the effective closure of the Strait of Hormuz, which has tightened global freight and energy flows. Hormuz disruptions have intensified fears over shipping costs, fuel availability, and the reliability of agricultural transport routes in key export regions. Vegetable oil prices jumped 5.9% in April, reaching their highest level since July 2022, driven by strong demand on both the food and energy conversion markets. Palm oil prices rose on stronger biofuel demand, especially in industrial-scale programs in Asia and the Americas that blend plant-based fuels with conventional diesel. Rising crude oil prices also pushed edible oil markets higher, as transport, processing, and packaging costs increased for many food items. Soybean and rapeseed oil prices climbed on robust biofuel production output in the United States and the European Union, where policy-driven blending targets remained in place. Sunflower oil prices were supported by tight Black Sea supplies, as regional export constraints reduced the availability of this widely used cooking oil. Global meat prices rose 1.2% from March, reflecting a gradual but steady increase driven by higher production and transport costs. Prices were also about 6.4% higher than the same period last year, indicating that the current uptrend has built up over several months. Beef prices hit new record levels, driven by a combination of limited cattle supply availability and strong consumer demand, especially in export-oriented markets. Tight Brazilian cattle supplies pushed markets higher, as production and export volumes struggled to keep pace with global demand. Strong Chinese import demand for beef added further pressure, as Beijing sought to replenish reserves amid fluctuating domestic production. Pig and poultry prices rose on the back of steady demand in the European Union and several African markets, where consumers rely heavily on relatively affordable meats. Global cereal prices rose 0.8% in April, as traders factored in concerns over potential yield shortfalls and higher input costs. Markets were hit by drought worries in the United States and Australia, two major grain exporting regions that are vital to global supply stability. High input costs, including fuel, fertilizer, and electricity, continue to impact farming output, making it harder for producers to maintain or expand production. The FAO noted that farmers are reducing planting of fertilizer-intensive crops due to elevated input costs, which could affect future harvest volumes and variety. FAO officials said global agricultural supply systems have so far remained relatively resilient, thanks to diverse sourcing and stock buffers in several countries. Still, analysts warn that prolonged instability in the Gulf could trigger deeper inflation shocks, especially if energy and fertilizer flows remain constrained. A shortage is expected to hit global food, fuel, and shipping markets in the coming months, compounding pressure on already vulnerable households and import-dependent nations. The massive fertilizer shock erupting from the intensifying Iran war threatens to ignite a prolonged multi-year global food crisis, with The Guardian issuing stark warnings about empty shelves, skyrocketing prices, and hungry populations from Asia to Africa. World Central Kitchen founder Jose Andres delivers a chilling warning that this relentless war could trigger a completely silent yet devastating collapse in the intricate global fertilizer trade network, disrupting shipments from key producers and leaving farmers worldwide without the nitrogen they desperately need to grow crops. Renowned chef and humanitarian Jose Andres warns world leaders to shift their focus far beyond volatile oil markets and zero in on the crumbling soil health crisis amid the escalating risks of the Iran war, where blockades and sanctions choke off essential supplies at the worst possible time. As the charity founder bluntly predicts, the entire world remains sleepwalking into an avoidable yet catastrophic famine crisis set to explode by fall 2026 and ravage through 2027, with governments ignoring the early signs of crop failures and supply chain breakdowns. These critical fertilizer delays now risk farmers completely missing those irreplaceable key planting windows across hemispheres, leading to dramatically cut yields in the coming harvests that could slash global food production by double digits. The resulting lower crop output will spark a terrifying chain reaction of surging food prices, widespread shortages, and deepening food insecurity that ripples from breadbaskets to urban slums, disproportionately devastating the poorest communities first. Explosive Strait of Hormuz tensions strike not just oil supertankers but the vital nitrogen fertilizer flows that power modern agriculture, with delays piling up and inventories dwindling at ports from the Gulf to Europe. Delayed fertilizer shipments across oceans risk farmers missing those precise planting windows entirely, guaranteeing weaker harvest yields that undermine food security for billions in the year ahead. These mounting trade shocks will inevitably trigger brutal higher prices for staples, force lower agricultural output worldwide, and hit poor nations the hardest, where import-dependent economies buckle under the strain. Even the smallest price rises in basic grains and staples hurt the most in poorer nations, where food is already scarce, budgets are stretched to breaking, and malnutrition rates climb as families skip meals to survive. The Iran blunder has now broken bread for millions worldwide, and here's the devastating breakdown from Think Global Health's April 1, 2026 report. Asia braces for a staggering 24% surge in acute hunger, with rice paddies failing, wheat imports stalled, and families in India, Pakistan, and beyond rationing meals amid fertilizer shortages ripping through the world's largest population centers. West and Central Africa faces a 21% hunger spike, where conflict zones already teeter on famine now grapple with delayed nitrogen supplies, turning marginal farms into dust bowls and pushing vulnerable kids toward starvation in nations like Nigeria and Mali. East and Southern Africa will see hunger rise by 17%, as maize and sorghum yields plummet from missed planting windows, exacerbating droughts in Ethiopia, Zimbabwe, and South Africa with supply lines choked by the Iran war's ripple effects. Latin America and the Caribbean confront a 16% increase, hitting soy and corn belts in Brazil, Argentina, and Haiti hardest, where export disruptions and rising costs leave urban poor scavenging for scraps in a region blindsided by distant Middle East fallout. The Middle East and North Africa endures a 14% uptick, ironically closest to the conflict, with subsidized bread vanishing from tables in Egypt, Yemen, and Syria as fertilizer flows halt and prices soar in the shadow of Hormuz blockades. Jose Andres proposes a straightforward 3% peace tax on global GDP to decisively end the mounting global hunger crisis, channeling funds directly into fertilizer stockpiles, emergency aid corridors, and resilient farming networks to shield vulnerable regions from war-induced shocks. Even a modest 2 to 3% price rise in food staples remains fully manageable for everyday Americans with their stable incomes and subsidies, but proves utterly devastating elsewhere across the developing world, as World Central Kitchen founder Jose Andres emphasizes in his urgent call to action. Haiti-like fragile economies now teeter on the brink of acute suffering as supply disruptions from Hormuz tensions deepen, with Jose Andres warning of collapsed markets, empty warehouses, and mass desperation in island nations and small states already battered by poverty and instability. Even if the Iran war grinds to a halt right now, experts predict persistent price spikes in grains, fertilizers, and basics will linger for years, keeping costs brutally elevated globally and prolonging the pain for farmers, consumers, and governments caught in the aftermath. Food staples are slipping even further out of reach for millions worldwide who already skip meals daily, forcing tough choices between rice and rent, as war ripples turn affordable nutrition into a luxury in slums from Manila to Mumbai. The World Food Programme warns that a prolonged Iran war combined with $100 per barrel oil could shove another 45 million people straight into acute hunger, overwhelming aid systems and sparking unrest in hotspots from sub-Saharan Africa to Southeast Asia. While Iran and the United States exchanged fire in Hormuz, Trump's own spy agency reportedly made a shocking revelation about Tehran's resilience. new intelligence findings now appear to contradict President Donald Trump's aggressive pressure campaign and blockade narrative against Iran recently. The Central Intelligence Agency reportedly believes Iran could survive an American blockade for several months despite growing military and economic pressure. According to intelligence assessments cited on May 7, Tehran may withstand the blockade for nearly 90 to 120 days. Officials familiar with the classified report reportedly said Iran could potentially endure the blockade for an even longer period strategically. The CIA also concluded that Iran still retains major missile and drone capabilities despite continued attacks from the United States and Israel. The assessment found Tehran could avoid immediate economic collapse by relying on crude stockpiles and alternative smuggling routes effectively. These findings sharply contrast with Trump's repeated claims that the blockade is already inflicting severe damage on Iran's struggling economy. Trump had announced a U.S. naval blockade targeting Iranian ports across the Strait of Hormuz region on April 12. U.S. President Donald Trump has issued a fresh ultimatum to Iran, this time giving Tehran 3 days. Trump told Fox News that Iran now has 3 days before its oil pipelines explode from within. He also claimed there would be permanent damage to Iran's oil wells if oil flow is not restored. Donald Trump said, and I quote, "What happens is that line explodes from within. Both mechanically and in the earth. Something happens where it just explodes, and they say they only have about 3 days left before that happens. And when it explodes, you can never rebuild it the way it is. It's a very powerful thing that takes place sort of having to do with nature." Unquote. According to Trump, the ongoing U.S. blockade would create catastrophic mechanical stress inside Iran's oil infrastructure. He further claimed that this pressure could trigger spontaneous explosions underground and within transport lines. However, energy experts say pipelines are typically equipped with safety valves and sensors designed to halt pumping before such failure spiral. They also note that if oil cannot move through the system, operators usually stop production at the source itself. That is why some experts believe Iran may still have roughly 2 to 3 months of inland storage before any forced production cut becomes necessary. Iran's vice president and head of the Strategic Energy Policy and Management Organization, Ismail Sagab Esfahani, has also reacted. Esfahani warned that Iran would retaliate against countries backing any damage to its oil sector. In a sharp response on X, he said, "Our math is different. 1 oil well equals 4 oil wells." Ismail Sagab Esfahani said, and I quote, "If any part of our infrastructure, including oil wells, is damaged as a result of a blockade, we guarantee that 4 times the damage will be inflicted on the same infrastructure in countries that support the aggressor. Our math is different. 1 oil well equals 4 oil wells." Unquote.